Good morning, folks. It's Friday, November 28th, 2012 here in Los Angeles, California. Welcome to RenmanMusicandBusiness.com. My name is Steve Rennie. I'm the Renman, and this is Renman Live. And it's a rainy day here in LA today. Friday, rainy. I like it, though. I kind of like it a lot. Let me tell you what we're up to. I started this little website called RenmanMusicandBusiness.com. To help young musicians and folks that had a desire to be in the music business kind of find their way around today's music business. And our version here is kind of reality-based. It's not the fairy tale version. Everything doesn't always work out. But if you come around here often enough, we're going to try to teach you some tricks that'll make sure that you get your best shot. To do that, we produced a bunch of videos and stuff early on during the summer. Kind of lessons, big picture things about how to get your head in the right place to do something great in the music business. And also lots of kind of nuts and bolts things. All of that stuff you can find on our YouTube page. Or actually, there's the front page of our site, RenmanMusicandBusiness.com. There's our YouTube page. All those videos that we talked about are posted there. All kinds of ways for you to learn stuff. I had lots of interviews with friends of mine in the business that also talking about their experience. So a great place to learn something. You know, if you come to our live show and you want to go and see what we've done previously this summer, you can go to our live stream page where you can see all of the interviews and shows that we've done over the past summer. Some great folks, some great advice. Again, a great place to learn something. You know, so pick up a cup of coffee and settle in and learn something. If you're looking to find out what's going on around here at RenmanMusicandBusiness.com, you can check us out on Twitter at RenmanMB, and you can find out all kinds of stuff. We'll keep you up to speed on news in the industry and the like. And of course, where would we be without our Facebook page? Got to have one of those, and we do hope you'll like us. I feel like I'm begging all the time when we do that. Anyway, that's that bit done. I want to talk about my friend, Mr. Jordan Berliant today. Play the video. How's that for an intro, man, huh?
Yeah, that feels big, man.
That was big, was it? You know, actually, the guy showed that last night, and I thought, you know, I don't want to seem insecure, but you know, I thought, can I get like one of those big popping things at the end there? But I guess
do it
not.
again, I'll come out from behind the curtain.
You know, we actually talked about that when we first said, you know, I recognize this is kind of like the faux Johnny Carson look here, but we played around with the idea of emerging from behind the red curtain here. So,
If Johnny Carson were just starting today, he'd be doing the same thing.
Yeah, he probably would, right on the internet. So, first of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to come in here. And I know you're a busy guy, and I've been stoked to see how many of my friends are willing to come in and share some of their stories on the internet on our wacky little web show here. So first, let me to say thanks for doing that. It means a lot to me, and it means a lot to our folks out there.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
What are you up to these days? Keeping busy? Last time we talked, we were at finishing up at the Home Depot Center.
Yeah.
What a great night that was, wasn't it?
That was a fantastic show. In fact, that was the biggest U.S. show, headline show that Linkin Park ever did. I'm not sure if you guys have
that was our
surpassed
biggest
that
one here as well. You
Yeah.
know, and it was a lot of fun. The whole summer was fun, actually.
It was a great summer. You know, I met with the band earlier in the week. You know, to sort of recap the year and sort of set the agenda for last year. And as part of the meeting, went over some of the highlights of the year, including what we did in touring. And they were all really stoked about you know, the fact that was their most successful U.S. tour with you guys. And you know, to a man, everybody said, you know, we finally got it right. You know, we toured with a band that we should have been touring with all our career, and really created some value for the you know, for the fans. And you know, I'll break a little news to you here.
Please, breaking news.
Yeah, I haven't told you this yet.
Yeah,
I haven't told you this yet.
Fire away.
So we can do it live on the internet. I got a call from our buddy Rob at the marketing organization who put together the Honda tour, and said, you know, Honda was so stoked about the tour, they want to do the you know, Linkin Park Honda Civic Tour Part 2.
Part 2.
And so we should talk about that.
We should go do I know I'm going to make some friends down south of the border here. You know, I know you're on email and you're easy to get a hold of. I get so many requests for the Incubus to come down to South America. And once the whole idea of the Linkin Park Incubus tour, which I dubbed the Linkubus tour here
Right.
in the office, started getting out there. People wanted us to come down there with Linkin Park, so we should probably try to go down to South America.
We did a show together, didn't we? A couple of years ago.
Yeah,
didn't we do a show?
where was that? In Chile.
Yeah.
Chile.
Yeah.
But also, did you guys play? You played in Brazil on that one too, didn't you?
Yes.
Okay, so we played 2 shows together.
Yeah, and then we just did some, I don't know, 4 or 5 shows down there in October last month.
We love it down there, man. It's funny how the concert business has grown around the world, and I don't know about you guys. You guys always sold a ton of records, and you guys are very successful internationally here. But we never sold any records down in South America. But we go down there, and the audiences were just off the hook. And I've made so many friends in Brazil and Chile, Argentina. I mean, real friends that I've met online that we got a chance to come down there and play and to meet them in person. It's always kind of fun.
It always feels like the next market you go to, the fans are even crazier than the last market.
Yeah, it does. It's funny because, as you know, and you guys would concur, I'm sure, traveling and touring internationally, it sounds sexy on paper, but there's a lot of moving parts, and it's a big ordeal to just go through in the airports with gear, and you're in a band, and everybody, either they want to meet you or they figure something dodgy is going on. So you get a little bit different look in a lot of different ways traveling with a band. My advice is if you're traveling with a band, travel light, if you know what I mean, because you'll probably have people wanting to meet you very up close and personal, I've found. So anyway, one of the things that was great today, we were sitting around, I'm always trying to figure out what we would talk about, right? And so over the course of the last year, as we were putting together that whole Linkin Park Incubus tour, we got a chance to talk about all kinds of things. And so I thought it would be fun today, just for us to sit here and just have our normal conversation. The last one we had was over lunch in Denver, and then over a beer later that night. And so for you folks out there, we want you to feel like you're coming and joining us right here on the couch. Duke, where did Duke go? Duke has left his position. So we actually have room for a couple more of you here. And so if you ever wonder what managers talk about when they get together, today we're going to share a little. Now, because I have a fading memory, he's much smarter than I am. I wrote it all down here so that we can remember it, Jordan, between the two of us. And frankly, I didn't do my homework last night and plan this out in great detail. So one of the things that I always love talking about is industry news and gossip I put on there.
Good.
Good.
Before we even get into this, I think we should, people out there watching might think it's unusual for managers to talk to other managers, because on one level, maybe they consider us competitors for acts. But to be honest, managers need support system. And the only person that understands what managers go through are other managers.
No question.
So I don't know how you feel about it, but, the people that I tend to respect the most in this industry are other managers, and the people that I think are the smartest people that can give me the best guidance. And frankly, when I'm stuck on something, I'll usually call another manager. And the thing is, most managers are very accessible to other managers.
It's because the misery loves company, and we were talking earlier that there's so many young folks out there that want to be a manager, right? And so they'll look at Jordan Berliant and look at your clients and all the things you've done, and they go, I want to be that guy, right? And they kind of miss a lot of the nuance that goes on here, But I feel like every line in my forehead has got a story behind it. And it wasn't because being a manager was the greatest job in that moment, don't you find?
So the question that I get asked most often by people outside the business is, so how did you become a manager? My answer is, I must have done something really horrible in a previous life.
It's they don't teach it. Well, actually, they do kind of try to teach it now in universities, but it's not something you can teach, and it's not something you get a real degree in being a manager, because my lessons, I know you've had a few too. They can't teach it. They maybe in a psychiatric course or something,
I think it's also one of the only professions where I think failing early on is almost a requirement to succeed later. I don't know any manager that is successful now that hasn't failed early in terms of not getting it right with an act, or not getting his or her temperament right in terms of how they approach something. And I have learned from failures early on.
I think it's an interesting point you make. I talk a lot. We did all these kind of wacky video lessons, right? And one of the things I did was we talked about focusing on the wins, right? And it's particularly athletes that are good have a short memory for their losses, But the truth of the matter is, some of my greatest lessons have been learned on stinging losses. Me
Right.
sitting in the corner, I can remember one I was talking about with a friend the other day where we decided when I was working as a concert promoter to do. We had Budweiser as our sponsor, and we're doing the Super Fiesta, and we were going to do it in Chicago and San Antonio and somewhere else. And so I did all my homework. I did all the demographics, and we booked these things. It was like a deal where we were covered up to the first 25. There was $1,000 in losses. We couldn't. It was a guaranteed. There was no way you could lose. At the end of that 3 nights, I was sitting in a corner with a bottle of tequila, with my team there. All of them going, "Rennie, was this your idea?" And all I could say was, how could I be so wrong? Because we so missed understanding the Latino market that it was like, it was a joke, right? And so I learned then something that I've tried to stick closer to, which is to figure out what you're really all about. And just try to keep being yourself and see how that works out before you try to be something else.
Yeah, I think the other lesson there that, I know both of us apply day in and day out is understand the fans.
Yeah.
They're the ones ultimately that are the power center of this industry.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't necessarily acknowledge that, but they're artists do. You always hear artists thanking the fans, and sometimes it sounds like a cliche, but it's not. Smart artists know that the fans are what powers their career.
I think you mentioned it's the smart ones that figure that out. It's not a given. I'm not going to mention any names, but the people that do take a personal approach in today's world, I think, do better. And you happen to have a pretty good bunch with those Linkin Park guys who are ritually appreciative of their fans, which is a terrific thing. So let's do this. Let's change gear.
You want to talk about news and gossip?
Yeah,
Because I'm prepared.
I want to. Well, we got a couple of things here. What do you read? When you're getting up to speed. What's your go-to?
So there's a few things. On a daily basis. The one thing I don't do is I don't go to industry gossip sites and boards. I probably should, but I just don't. I tend to, stick to, more traditional sources of information. I every morning I'll read, allaccess.com.
Okay, we got allaccess.com.
Which which tends to be somewhat radio focused, which I think for a good reason is helpful to understand that landscape, because we both know how important that is to to reaching an audience. And then the other thing I'll tend to focus on is the Billboard. I read Billboard. I read it electronically. I travel a lot, so I put it on my iPad and read it on the planes.
Me too. Let's go to a couple of things that caught my eye today. It was fun. Some couple stories. I love it, but that's my go-to one. Is
one
Billboard.
other thing I read. I read technology blogs, and the reason I read technology blogs is. I think people tend to forget the relationship between technological innovation and creative innovation. And what I mean by that is, if you look at how musicians have progressed over the years, a lot of it has been fueled by what's available to them. In the 70s, synthesizers became available. And so the whole prog rock, and you heard synthesizers and everything. Maybe starting with aptly named song for today, aspirational song, "Here Comes the Sun."
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe the first mainstream song that had a synthesizer solo in it. In the 80s, you got into sampling and got into drum machines and beatbox music, and the whole hip hop sound was born. Trying to understand, what's next on the cusp. So I look at things like TechCrunch, Mac Rumors, a lot of that stuff.
We had somebody on the show the other day, a great little app called Hootsuite, right? which is this app that allows you to do social media, kind of industrial strength posting and so forth. But one of the things I love about it, this is another shameless plug for Hootsuite here, is they give you the ability to search certain keywords and stuff. So I was sitting here, I searched, music industry, touring, Billboard, and you have all those stories in one place, and it really does make it easy. So today, since we both read Billboard, I saw one today on BillboardBiz.com, which is the online version that caught my eye, and it always catches my eye. It said Dr. Dre tops the Forbes 2012 highest paid musicians list, right? And I'm always interested to see who's making the money and who's not. But at the top here, what do you reckon Dr. Dre made there?
Probably over $100 million. I think the real question is how much did it come actually from his music activities as opposed to his
breakout.
His beats, interest in beats, and his participation in that technology.
110 million, $110 for him. Here are a couple others. Roger Waters, 88 million. How long has Roger Waters been making freaking dough? He's 60, almost 7 years old. I was listening to the Pink Floyd when I was 16. My 16 and 19-year-old are still listening to Pink Floyd.
The best concert I think I ever saw to this date was 1977, Soldier Field in Chicago, Pink Floyd Animals tour.
Amazing. With the big balloons and everything. Yeah,
it was incredible. And it was the first time I actually saw an artist perform with visual content synchronized to the music. And nowadays we both know with LED screens most artists are performing that way, but they were doing it 30 years before anybody else was doing it.
When I was at Concert Pro, we did a bunch of shows with Pink Floyd, and it was the most spectacular thing. And part of it was an acknowledgement. They weren't the flashiest performers in the world, not when you compared them to Led Zeppelin, the Rolling Stones, and Rod Stewart and all those.
I think they said 2 words during the show, but it was so compelling.
Yeah,
I mean, the show was just so compelling.
Yeah. No, wrote some great songs. Elton John, 80 million. U2, 78 million. Did you see the last U2 tour talking about syncing lights and technology? What a spectacular.
Yeah, amazing.
So, you know what? A few clients on here, I wouldn't mind it. But you know what? Here, I'm going to say this. I think these numbers are highly inflated, folks. If you're out there reading, you actually think Dr. Dre took in $110. Not true. I think that's probably all of his gross income and so forth. But
it's got to be gross numbers, right?
Even Sade, number 25. Now, you and I both know. You don't handle Sade, do you?
No.
No, that's Roger
Well, I actually
Davis.
wish I did.
Yeah, okay. Well, I was kind of getting at that.
The fact that
she comes out of the woodwork and says she made $33 million last year, Jordan.
I mean, she endures. And I think the thing about that is most people might, in the U.S., look at Sade as an artist that has peaked. What is important to recognize is artists like Sade that continue to tour internationally never peak.
Yeah.
Well, you look always go in and play arenas.
You look at this list here, Dr. Dre, Waters, Elton John, U2, Take That, Bon Jovi, Paul McCartney. All of these have a huge live component. And you're right about Sade. She puts out a record every 10 years in tours. But if you could come out and make $33 million if that was real, that wouldn't be a bad year's work.
Well, I think this is the biggest shift that's happened in the, from a manager standpoint is what we have to focus on. I'm sure as we do, you do the same thing where every year you analyze what the sources of revenue are for your clients. And the biggest shift. Well, you ripped that with some anger there.
No, that was conviction, not anger. Oh. That was conviction there. I was pissed off because I wish I had a couple of those.
That's what I was getting
here.
at.
God, maybe there was a little bit of vengeance in there. I apologize.
So I'm curious to know whether you've noticed the same shift I have. But even 5-6 years ago, in any given artist, maybe half to 2/3 of their revenue would come from recording activities, and revenues directly related to recording, which are, of course, royalties, licensing revenue from the recordings, and mechanical publishing revenues that you get from leasing the copyright for that recording. And now I look at our biggest artists, and the revenue they're getting from recording music is less than 10% of their total revenue. However, I think the challenge that guys like us have is, even though that recording revenue is less than 10%, it is the creation of new music and the ability to market and promote that new music and reach an audience with that new music that fuels where the revenue is, right?
Yeah, no great music, no great music career, simple.
And so the trick is, even though you're not being remunerated directly for those activities, you are being compensated in the form of if it works right, higher ticket sales, higher ticket revenue, higher merchandising numbers, and potentially higher licensing and sponsorship
Yeah, you got to
revenue.
get the music right, don't you? And I say this all the time to people because it's easy to overthink the business and it's easy to get lost in the business and forget that it all starts with a great song. And if you don't have that, the rest of it won't follow. And so I want to come back to that whole idea about, different sources of income and so forth. But there's one story here today that I just love. That you've seen this story a million times. They changed the name, but there's always some story. I'll read something in the paper where you read it and you just go, it's nuts. So here's today's. Shakira's, came out this morning, 10, 20 minutes ago, Joe? Shakira's ex-boyfriend, $100 million lawsuit claims he was responsible for unparalleled financial success. Now, I look at this and I say, are you fucking kidding me here? You gotta be kidding me, right? So I was reading through this, and here's a couple of quotes. This is from his attorney. She was extremely successful as a recording artist long before Antonio ever became her business manager. He didn't have a contract. Best I know, she's always had a manager, correct?
Yeah.
So he met her 6 years ago. She was doing pretty well 6 years ago. He said the romance became a business partnership in 2004 after she lost millions on her first world tour, and he agreed to be her business partner. And so clearly that was a key moment there. They had no written agreement governing their partnership. She was instructed to terminate Dalo Rio and so forth and so on, and now she's having a kid with soccer star Gerard Pique. I see stuff like this all the time, people that overinflate their own sense of this. Now, if he was writing Shakira's songs and was actually responsible for this, maybe he has some claim, but I see these kind of things all the time. And if he thinks he's going to get $100 million, you got to be freaking kidding me, folks. Okay.
But what's interesting about that is
that one, conviction again.
And it's and the strategy is not limited to the music industry or the entertainment industry for that matter. You see these stories all the time with athletes and others. It becomes a question of I don't think they launched a suit expecting to get $100 million.
No.
What they did was it's a nuisance suit, and the question is, what are you willing to pay if you're Shakira and Shakira's representatives to make it go away, and what is the cost of your defense going to be?
Yeah, it's an ugly business, isn't it? That kind of attitude.
And it's the kind of thing I guess in the U.S. that we're sort of struggle with. On the one hand, those of us that have ever been victims of nuisance suits know, and most of us in the industry have at one time or another, unfortunately, know what a drag it is. On the other hand, to pass tort reform where loser pays or where there is some other criteria or restriction in your ability to launch a suit, I guess does in theory have an adverse effect on people that have genuinely been wronged by somebody, and so we struggle with that balance in the U.S.
Yeah. This kind of story happens all the way. There was the guy who was going out with Britney Spears who saved her, and this and that, and it's just crazy. So folks, you know what? Be careful about who you pick as your partners. We do a little video bit, and one of our little lessons was about picking your partners. And it's so important, folks, to get partners that you can count on, because otherwise you get these kinds of messes.
Is there an equivalent of a prenup for a relationship that doesn't end in marriage?
I'm not aware of it yet, but if there is, maybe that's probably a whole different show. Okay, let's change gears here. Enough of this news and so forth.
Wait, there is two other things that I did want to talk about that are at least current.
Okay, fire away.
One is, did you see that iTunes 11 launched yesterday? Mm-hmm. And I was wondering if you
I haven't downloaded it
had
yet.
Any thoughts? I downloaded it.
What do you see different in it?
I guess the thing that I see is that, and I think this is sort of indicative of Apple's strategy, is the computer software that they're creating, that software that runs on their laptops and desktop computers, is now mirroring what they're running on phones and tablets.
Yeah.
And it used to be the other way around.
Yeah.
And so this iTunes 11, I think, strongly resembles the experience that you get on an iPad and your phone, even though it's not in a touchscreen environment.
Yeah. It's been interesting to watch. I have two teenagers around the house here, so I get a whole different look on how people are relating to stuff. And at first I wasn't a big mobile person, But I've become committed now. I'm sitting here watching, our show here on my iPad. I don't go anywhere without my iPad. Now, I don't read the newspaper in the traditional way. I still have to order it down there,
Right.
at the bottom of the driveway. But I watch it this way, and I think it's where the world's going. And I think it really speaks to something here that everybody in the business needs to think about, which is that there was a day when the industry kind of set the rules. They told you when you were going to go to radio, when the record was going to be in the store, what you were going to pay, and it worked, and it was tried and true. But it wasn't very respectful of the customers. And I think in today's world, the new rules, the new boss says, you're going to give me the music the way I want it, when I want it, how I want it, or I'm not going to play ball with you.
Right.
And that's a whole different animal that we talk to. It's also a nice little segue into a conversation that's raging in the world today, and one that I look at in a very personal way with my friends in Incubus. And it's this whole idea of indie labels versus major labels and what the benefits are. So first, to frame that conversation, I want to play you an interesting clip that from Wednesday. We had Lisa Worden, assistant program director of K-Rock. We talked all about kind of a number of different things, but one of the things we talked about was this notion of indie versus major. And I want to play this clip. She had some interesting thoughts on the subject.
It's interesting. More than ever, a lot of the music is coming from indie labels.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be that the major labels had everything. And now, I think of a song like the Lumineers song, Ho Hey, which is on Dual Tone. No one knows what Dual Tone Records is.
Yeah.
And that's going to be one of the biggest songs of the year.
Yeah.
So, yes, there have been songs we've played that have had nothing going on, but they might have been signed to a label. The biggest thing I have seen in the last 3 years is indie labels, the comeuppance. I mean, it really has been big.
What's your thoughts on that, Mr. Berliant?
It's interesting when artists who were starting out used to strive to be able to get signed by a major, because back when I was working in a record company in the dark ages, the control point that they had was so powerful, and the control point of the value chain between the content creators and the customer was essentially, their value proposition was their effectiveness and efficiency in being able to press and distribute physical product, round pieces of plastic, and get them into 15,000 things in the US that were called record stores that don't really exist anymore. And now I think the control point is really shifted to the artist. And the control point to me is the artist's ability to aggregate the audience online and be able to maintain and grow your audience and serve your audience directly with content online, which is something that, with Linkin Park, for example, or Enrique Iglesias, for example, we do constantly. Or I should say the artist does constantly. We facilitate it on their behalf, but the artists are constantly tweeting, Facebooking, posting videos for the consumers to see. Linkin Park is the first band to surpass 1 billion views on YouTube. Billion with a B. And they have amassed 47 million Facebook fans that they literally can contact with one press of a button.
Yeah.
And that is something that I believe is the new control point of this whole value chain. And the question becomes, who can facilitate that the best? And are either indies or majors even focusing on that as the centerpiece of their activities? It seems to me, and with good reason, the majors' focus and centerpiece is still based around getting radio play. And I say for good reason, because despite the advent of all the other ways that of music discovery for the consumer, if you look at any of the data, and we look at all of it, including research that we do on our own artists, terrestrial radio is still the #1 place where the consumer learns about new music.
Yeah.
And so, to me, if you can combine the ability to focus directly on your audience and aggregate your audience through social media, and you can still get songs on the radio to move the masses, that to me is a perfect combination.
Yeah,
And
but you still need that, and because it's funny. There's this kind of romantic notion of the indie artist, right? And yet, over my career, I had the opportunity, I remember sitting with Chris Cornell, not to name drop, but we were some freaking thing way back when, and he'd been on an indie label early in his career, and I asked him about the difference between an indie and a major label. And there was no question in his mind that he'd rather be on a major label. And it's because they offer a lot of things into the equation that I think, not the least of which is money. Okay, it still takes a lot of money to play at the top levels, and a certain level of expertise because they have people who have been doing it. I had a chance to talk with Tom Corson to take the flip side of this, the major side of the equation a bit. And we're going to be playing that interview next week on Monday and Wednesday. It's great stuff for all you folks out there watching. You'll want to check it out. But Tom offered a counterpoint or something to think about in that discussion about the indie versus major. Darren, play that clip.
You generally need a label for scale. So if you want to actually be a big artist and actually reach the world and have a lot of and hit all those touch points, which are very difficult to hit, you need an army.
Thoughts?
I think in the pop world you do.
Yeah.
I also think I think there's one other option. If I could walk over to the
Sure,
board here.
please. I love to, please. Professor Berliant with the chalk here.
There's been this debate for a while, about indie versus majors, and I think there's another option, and that is self.
Okay.
And let me give you an example of self. We work with Slash, and Slash had been on a series of majors, obviously, throughout his career with Guns N' Roses and then with Velvet Revolver, and but was not beholden to any label. And what we came up with was a model where Slash releases his own albums in the U.S. We license them to majors in some territories internationally, to indies in some territories internationally. But in the U.S., he releases the music himself through a major distributor. So the only services that the major provides in the U.S.
Pay no attention. That's Duke, our dog. If anybody wonders whether this is really my office,
It's your security system.
that's my security guard, Duke, out there. Sorry, carry on. Charming, isn't it? He'll be coming in here all wet and laying on you in a second. So, folks, like I said, this ain't freaking, this ain't
I'll
Leno
look forward to
for
that
sure.
eventuality.
Okay, yeah.
Anyway, so what we do in the U.S. is his music is distributed to Walmart and Target and Best Buy through and put into digital music retailers by a distributor. But all of the choices in terms of marketing and promotion are made by Slash, and in some cases we even hire our own independent staffs to work the records at radio.
Sure.
And the value of that is if you are a brand name like Slash is,
Who benefited, to be fair, not to interrupt you, but who benefited mightily, just like Linkin Park and Incubus and Radiohead and some of the other bands that have gone indie. They benefited mightily by
No
the
question.
work done by the machine,
There's no
which
question.
would not necessarily be the same for
No
someone just
question.
starting.
But his focus has changed now to building up his constituency of fans through social media, so he can market the music that way effectively, market his tours that way effectively, seek sponsorship that way effectively, and it's worked out because the bottom line is instead of making $1 to $1.50 per album sold, which is after all the chargebacks from being on a major, that's what we make. He's now making $4 or $5 a record.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting conversation, and one that I go through with my guys here. And so I think that the upshot of it is that where indies used to be not really part of the game, they can be part of the game. Where majors were always part of the game, they can still be part of the game, but they're probably needing to learn some new tricks.
I forgot to mention the punchline with Slash. Punchline with Slash is his album came in number 3 in the U.S., which I believe, I don't know that there's any, that they keep records on this. I believe was the most highly charted self-released record in history.
You know what? It won't be the last one either.
No.
The Lumineers. Jay Boberg. Jay Boberg was in here, over the summer talking about the Lumineers. That record is still continuing to grow. And it's the one that Lisa Worden was referencing.
But let me ask you something. You're sort of at this crossroads with your guys. What are the things that you're evaluating? What are you talking about?
Well, the things that we talk about are, it was a conversation I was having with one of the band guys yesterday, that the option of a properly motivated, key item there, properly motivated label, major label, with money, with expertise, with focus, and with some sense of a plan that you're in sync with, would still be my probably number one option, assuming that we work out some of the deals.
So when you say properly motivated, which you said twice for emphasis, does that mean in order to properly motivate them, given the shrinking revenue base in terms of selling music the traditional ways, that you need to include other rights in there for them to be motivated?
Well, that was the other little asterisk. I wouldn't be inclined. There's no scenario. I shouldn't say there's no scenario. There's no scenario short of a large chunk of money coming your way that we would indulge the 360 model that a brand new act like some of the folks out here would have to take. Okay, that just wouldn't be part of it. And I think, in the conversations I've had with major labels, I think there's an expectation that that's not going to be part of it. So the motivation thing becomes the most important thing because they're not going to give you a huge advance anymore.
Right. So how do you motivate them?
Well, part of it is trust, right? You have to believe that the people you're getting in business with are still going to be there when you put out a record. That's not a given in today's business, nor was it ever. You have to have, you have to have certain champions inside the company. And my favorite champion is the head of the company for one very important reason. That person has the ability to say yes and trigger a whole chain of events that hopefully you've orchestrated properly. That said, a band like Incubus, a band like Linkin Park, a band like Radio have the ability to go out and generate income through touring that allows them to front end and put up the money that helps start that chain of events going. So it's something I think about a lot. And for me, what we'll look at is what is the lay of the land at the moment we have to make that decision. And I'll be honest, that one of the great benefits of doing this little web show, it's given me a chance to take a look at the landscape from the eyes of people that are just starting, to the people like Tom Corson who are looking at it from a major label, to people like ourselves, and I know that you guys, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later, are involved in a bunch of different areas inside your management company, which we'll get in a second, that touch on some of the function that's been addressed in the record. But first, before we go there, one of the things we try to do with our website, I see a whole bunch of questions on the chat thing here as well, is we wanted to provide a connection between people on the outside that were looking for answers, to give them a chance to literally feel like they were on the couch here with us. There was a gentleman who's on the chat board here. Chris, here's your moment, big guy. He's from a band called the Edgar Allan Poets, which, by the way, can we just put that? We should start keeping track of great freaking band names. Is that right? Edgar Allan Poets? You got to be fucking kidding me. You're fucking kidding me?
It's their first album called The Raven?
I don't know. We should ask him here, but we have just a written question. Anyway, here's
this is sort of an Edgar Allan Poe day we're having out here.
It is a little bit dark out there today. There's not going to be any golf in my fucking
You're not
future
a mutter,
here.
huh?
No, definitely not a mutter. But we got some stuff back here we're going to talk about. Anyway, back to our friend Edgar Allan Poets. He said, what can an indie band do to have you, Jordan Berliant, as their manager? What are you looking for? Are you looking for new bands right now? Do you find them, or do we have to come and knock at your door?
So that is a great question. And I think you have to knock at my door, but not the way you think you do. The way you get my attention is by basically doing one of two things, and they both have to exist simultaneously. One is you have to do something creatively innovative, and something that I think breaks new ground creatively, and both sonically as well as visually, because
so
we live in a visual world.
Yeah.
So, for example, a few years ago when aPpKVg made that video, they spent all of $35, I'm told, on that.
But it's a great idea.
It was a great idea that demonstrated a level of creativity that hadn't existed before, at least in terms of that presentation. That was the first thing. The second thing that a band has to do is demonstrate that they understand how to build an audience and are willing to work constantly at serving that audience. And I look at everything from the number of Facebook likes they have to the number of Twitter followers they have, to the number of subscribers of their YouTube channel they have, to the amount of stuff they're putting out there.
Yeah.
If I see those two things, then I'm seeing a validation for somebody breaking new creative ground, and that's something that I believe I can add value to.
And that's something that gets you excited as a manager. You want to work with people.
That's where I say, if I were to work with an artist like this, or our company were to work with an artist like this, could we add value to this and get it to the next level?
Yeah, I think those are great things, and it's interesting that you brought up something that touches on things beyond just the music and the presentation, and it's that issue of character. Are they willing to do the things it takes to actually build a career? It's not a 10-minute process. Bruce Floor was in here, he's a buddy of ours, who made the comment that I thought was great, that it takes 10 years from the time you start till the time you have something that resembles a career. And that requires a lot of dedication. It requires plenty of time for you to demonstrate your audience building, plenty of time to come up with the songs and presentation. But that character part is big. And for me, if somebody asked me that question, I would say similar. They got to have talent, they got to have songs, they have to have, for me, an undeniable live presence, because that's so much a part of the business. But once I check off that list, if I didn't think somebody had the character, that they had the balls and the courage and the tenacity to go through all the bullshit that they're going to go through to have a successful career, I would punt on that along. I have actually witnessed a number, and I won't mention names, of wonderfully talented people that at some point in my relationship with them where I was convinced that they were working their way back to ground zero. And as I've mentioned a million times, the decisions you make after you make great music have such a huge impact in your career. And you know, as a manager, he's nodding here, folks, that you got to know in that crucial moment that you're betting that Chester or Brandon Boyd or Mike Einziger or Shinoda are going to do the right thing, right? So anyway, there you have. There's one of our questions here from Chris. So thank you, Chris, for that question. I want to talk about something else that you and I have had a continuing conversation on for a while. In the old days of the rock business, when I first started, we were listening to Led Zeppelin at the beginning of the show. Their manager was a guy named Peter Grant, handled one band. You know,
Scary guy.
Very scary guy. He was a thug. Okay. There were plenty of those English thugs. Dee Anthony, you know, who was Michelle Anthony's dad, manager type. Sharon Osbourne's dad, Don Arden, was another one of those guys. But the point I was making is a lot of those early 70s rock acts had a single manager. The Beatles were identified with their manager. Today, it's a little bit different world out there. There are lots of big firms, and the Collective is one of the biggest, most powerful management companies here in town. Describe what goes on in a big firm like the Collective that would be different from back in an old school with Incubus, one manager, one band.
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One is that we've built an infrastructure to service the various parts of an artist's career that need attending to. That because of the state of the record industry, they're no longer focusing on, or if they are, they're just not able to focus on to the degree that is required. And I guess what I mean by that is, back in Peter Grant's day, there wasn't a lot for a record company to do other than pay for the recording sessions, get the record on the radio, have a promo staff that can get the record on the radio, and to the degree it was necessary, when you roll into Chicago, roll into Detroit, set up some interviews. It was pretty easy, pretty simple, basic system back then. The internet didn't exist, MTV didn't exist, and that's basically what record companies did. Got the record on the radio, and they chased the stuff that radio told them was great. And they got the artist in Rolling Stone article, and that had some mass to it. Nowadays, if you look at the possibilities for a consumer to get in touch with an artist, radio is certainly one way, and radio has expanded and become, severely formatted. So you're not talking about one format of rock, you're talking about 6 or 7 formats of rock. You've got the internet, which to me is a mile wide and an inch deep, meaning to get any mass, you've got to go to literally hundreds, if not thousands, of sites to get any kind of mass there. You've got MTV, especially internationally, that still plays music, and MTV's competitors, especially in places like the UK and in Asia and Japan. You've got TV shows that are more and more featuring music. If you look at, the popularity of music has never been more popular.
Yeah.
Don't judge the popularity of music by what it sells. Judge it by the fact that, 2 or 3 of the top-rated TV shows in the U.S. are music-centric shows.
Yeah.
No,
I think there's definitely lots going
you've got
on.
that. You've got gaming platforms with Xbox and PlayStation 3, and new technologies, apps every day that can touch the consumer. And so, how do you service all of that? How do you create a presence in all of these places? So, regardless of whether the consumer prefers terrestrial radio or satellite radio or internet radio or gaming as part of their lifestyle or reading blogs, how do you get your artists intersect with their lifestyle? And the thing that we do is we do research on the artist fans to understand what their behavior is, and not only who they are demographically and what they watch, what they listen to, and what they read, but what do they do? What do they like? What are their hobbies? Are they skiers? Are they fishermen? Are they hunters? Are they do they like to cook? Do they like to garden? Et cetera, et cetera. And we figure out from how to intersect their lives with the activities that our artists do, but also the media choices that we make to present the artist. And it takes a lot of people to do that.
Okay, you're heading to a question I have. So to do that, and to see if I can encapsulate, all these functions that were out there, you could argue in some ways the labels had people to handle it. The internet being the newest wrinkle, and obviously it started as kind of the ghetto of the record companies, now moved into the first cabin here. The old school manager type would manage each of those functions within the label. The new person today, you got to understand that some of those aren't going to be covered by a label, and that they're going to have to either hire out on a case-by-case basis, or you hire in a staff to do that. How does doing all of that function affect the overhead of a big manager? Because typically most managers, folks, are on a 15, 20% commission.
Yeah, and the thing is, as you
And
know,
if I'm getting into a sense there, you can cut me off.
It takes just as much internal resources to fail as it does to succeed.
Yes.
You spend as much time failing in this industry as you do succeeding. And, so when you build an overhead like this, so for example, we've got internal radio people that work both with the staff of labels where the artist is signed to a label, or put together the staff and work it themselves and quarterback it themselves in the case of an artist like Slash, for example. And we've got internal tour marketing people that just deal with the marketing people and promoters every day to ensure that the promotions that are being set up at local media are handled the right way. We put packages together so they can leverage that. We've got half a dozen digital people just on the music side.
Now let me ask
just
you a
on the
question.
music
Now
side.
you're going to hate me for this one. Do you think that in adding on staff and adding on all this overhead, do you think that there's, and by extension having a lot of artists and clients to help you cover all that now, do you risk becoming the record company that we all hated, where there's so much going on that you lose focus, that you become average at 20 things instead of great at 1 or 2?
So it's an interesting question, but I don't think we risk it from this standpoint. Number one, we don't have hundreds of artists the way the record company does. We don't have to choose priorities, which to me is a very ugly word, but we all know exists. Everything we do is a priority, or we don't do it. And we are constantly looking at how to ensure that the bandwidth that we have internally matches what is needed in order to thoroughly service an artist. So, and service our roster. So I don't think we risk it. And I think the other reason we don't risk it is we're not trying to sell something that the audience doesn't want. We're not chasing a 20th century model the way that I believe most majors are forced to do right now, because the ugly little secret of the music industry is more people are buying more music more frequently than they ever have before. But they're buying it in smaller
Well,
increments.
it's back to the 50s
And-
where it's a singles business.
And 2/3 of the music that is sold right now, just the universe of what is sold, are individual tracks. But there is no, the majors are business, Tom Corson talked about scale. He's talking about this. The problem with the music industry is it can't scale itself down to meet the demand and behavior of the consumer. And whenever a business isn't capable of doing that,
It's a problem.
they go away.
Yeah.
They go away and are replaced by something else.
Well,
The consumer always wins that debate.
all right, well, we're going to come back to this. We got to jump. You got Jonathan Eisenberger there, Joe? He's not there? Okay, we're going to get somebody on there when Joe's going to let us, come back to it. There's a gentleman, we do a segment here, each week called Ask Renman, right? My attempt to let people have some outlet for some questions. So I got a call or an email from a gentleman who was managing an artist. And he, was manager and it just starting off, and he has some ability to get his hands on some funds, a decent amount of money, and he was looking for some advice about how to put together a marketing plan for his artist. So let me see if we got Joe. Do we got him on the phone there, Joe? All right, Joe. I got Joe Lilac here, man. He's awesome. Jonathan, you there?
Hey guys, how's it going?
All right, this is Jonathan Eisenberger. Did I pronounce that correctly?
That's the way to do it.
Okay, and he's the manager. Tell us the name of your artist here.
His name is Matt Cozio.
Matt Cozy. Okay, first off, let me introduce you to my friend Jordan Berliant. Now you have not one, but two managers to help give you some advice. So lay it out to us, your scenario, and then tell us how we can help you, Jonathan.
All right. Well, Matt basically is an independent singer-songwriter from Jersey who, I'm very lucky because he happens to be a fantastic musician and a singer combined. So I basically put together and secured a deal where I can get the necessary funding that I personally believe would be able to launch him and to make a great record and hopefully put him on a tour. And I think I got a little ahead of myself because I put together $300,000, and now I'm trying to figure out how to allocate it.
Jordan, thoughts?
Yeah.
Now, this is a brand new artist, hasn't been heard at all. Let me ask you this: have you made a record already, Jonathan?
He has made one before I had started to work with him that didn't do, made it on his own, didn't do much.
So my question, the reason I asked that is, out of the $300,000, have you made a record yet?
Oh, none. I haven't even started to spend any.
Okay.
So the way, so you basically have an artist in a
Yeah,
blank
this
canvas.
is now like Dr. Phil and,
Yeah.
and Oprah here.
So
now.
the way I generally approach this, and this may sound counterintuitive, is I work backwards. I look at what at the end of the day, what am I trying to achieve over the next 18 months? What is the finish line for me, and what would I like to achieve with this artist, realistically? And then I work backwards on a timeline to figure out how to get there. And I try to establish milestones along the way that allows me to know whether I'm succeeding in my plan toward achieving that goal, or whether that's some sort of pivot point or inflection point where I need to
think about a different plan.
Decide on an alternative.
I actually love that idea, by the way, of working backwards. It's an old golfing trick. Somebody told me once that one of the greatest golfers, a guy named Sam Snead, would start on the 18th hole and work backwards. And as you point out, it's kind of counterintuitive, but it's not. If you figure out where you want to be, then you start to look back down the proverbial fairway and see where you might best approach each place that you need to be on the way to getting there. So
Jonathan, Jonathan, let me ask you a question. In 18 months, realistically, where would you like your artist to be? Where would you like Matt to be so that you feel he has accomplished, a goal in 18 months? And what is that goal?
Well, I'll tell you this. In 18 months from this point, I've been with him now for 8 months, and from the very get-go, I decided the first thing we need to do is to get him writing with as many writers and producers that obviously would be apropos to pair him up with, and that's what I've done. I've put him together with these fantastic writers and fantastic producers, and that's been going on for about 8 months. In 18 months from this point, I would definitely like to have that done and have a great record, and then support it with a fantastic tour.
Okay, so having a collection of great music that you can begin to create an identity for your artist, and then taking that to the next level by having that artist perform that music. So along the ways, there's a number of questions that you have to ask yourself. One is, are you going to try to sell this music? Is that a viable approach starting with a brand new artist? Are you going to try to give away the music at first? Is there a way that you can partner with an entity that would benefit by you giving away the music? Is it leverageable to give away the music? How are you going to expose the music? How are you going to build a fan base so that there are people that want to see the artist? You know, one of the things that we don't often talk about in our industry is how to market an artist. And to me, in this day and age, it starts with the fans marketing the artist, because you're never going to find a better marketing and sales force than your fans.
Mm-hmm. But you gotta get them in the early days.
You have to
the
excite
chicken
them.
And the egg is that you have to have something that attracts them. Let me ask a question. Is Matt a performer?
He is.
Does he play live shows around right now?
He does. As a matter of fact, you know, I'm from New York. He's from Jersey. We're in LA now, and he actually played last night.
Great.
Does he require a band to perform, or does he perform solo, or both?
At this point, just because he does it solo, but we have a fantastic band back east that just, an all-star cast. And
But bands are expensive to travel, and
bands are expensive to travel.
They eat, and
They eat,
they
they
need a
sleep.
place to
A lot
sleep. And
Yeah.
Bands are expensive to travel. A lot of the musicians that play with him are actually on tour with other established artists. But when we're ready to go on a full-out tour, that's obviously when I will put in the money. But in the meantime, he does a fantastic job. Really, he's a showman, and he captures the audience. His vocal ability is fantastic, and his music's fantastic. And I've reached out to actually some people that have been working in the industry for a while, invited them out to shows, and they loved it. They all thought it was great.
what are you doing now to capture a fan base and to aggregate a fan base and service the fan base so that they feel part of Matt's future, so that they feel part of his career, so that they are incentivized through their love of his music to evangelize it to their friends?
Well, first thing we do, we attack from 2 points. From the live show, he's the most personable guy out there. Everyone gets to meet him. Everyone hangs out with him, and he's interested in just really strengthening a relationship. And people will eventually say, outside, we're great music, great guy, and I believe that will, word of mouth will spread from that end. But then, like you said earlier in the show, the internet's like miles long and an inch deep. We're going with that route as well. I'm pushing him on all the social medias, all the different websites, blogs. We're doing everything we can to try to get his content out there.
Right, but the most valuable platforms on the internet are not third-party platforms. They're the ones that you control, right?
Facebook,
So
Twitter,
does he have a YouTube channel set up, and are you looking at how many people are subscribing, and are you giving them the opportunity and the incentive to subscribe to that channel so that you can reach them? The value of subscribing on a YouTube channel is every time Matt puts out a new clip of what he's doing, or a video blog, or a music video, or anything of that nature, those that subscribe are notified that it exists. They can watch it, and what's great about YouTube is you can watch it, and if you think that your brother or your sister or your mother or your best friend wants to see it, with one click you can send it to them, which is great.
I want to throw something in the mix here, Jordan. I'm looking at that $300,000 again and making believe, that's what we had to spend. You're going to be putting them with writers and other producers. That's going to cost you some money just to make an album, right? And one of the things that I think about a lot now is and it speaks to your point of how many individual songs get done.
Right. What is the value of an album right now with
That's
a new
exactly
artist?
where I was going. And the reason I say that, because it impacts it on two levels. One, what's the album worth? Well, if you don't think it's worth as much as it used to be, I'll tell you something about how albums go. If you put an album out in the old school business, you would be judged by your first or second single. And if those didn't click, you'd be out of business. You would have potentially wasted 10 bullets in your clip that didn't see the light of day. Versus today, if you've got a limited budget, you've got an artist that you believe in, you're going to need to have them touring, you're going to need to have them doing things like building a website, maybe a publicist and all those kind of things. I wonder if a better approach is today isn't to go on a song by song basis. You put that guy in a studio, you put him with some different writers, and you pick something that's great, record that song, and make that your first bit of content that brings people back and speaks to Jordan's point
Totally agree with
about engaging your customer. Because here's what I've learned, and I've learned it from the Linkin Park guys who do it so well. To keep the conversation going, right, requires an almost endless flow of conversation pieces, right? Most of which some of which you have to pay for: music, touring, videos, right? But lots of ones you don't have to. So you need to have a steady supply. And if you're thinking about 300 grand, it all starts with the music. Jordan said that at the beginning. I've had 20 people on it that all tell you the same thing. If you don't have great music, you won't have a great career. No matter how hard you try, no matter how clever you are, you cannot polish a turd into a diamond. It just doesn't work that way. So you got to start with that. And once you have that, then I think you got to figure out how to keep a steady supply.
Yeah, so I think that's 100% right, and I think the word album is used by default without much thought, especially with a new artist. I believe the two most important things to do are to have a great song, just one great song, and figure out how to present it to your fans in the most compelling, interesting, creative way possible online. And if you do that, you are providing the tools for the early adopters to become your marketing force, and because the tools exist from a technology standpoint for them to easily spread the word.
Yeah.
Easily spread the word. But it all starts with having a great song, a great piece of music, and a great way to present that artist so that people understand what's special about him.
And what's unique.
And if you just think about those two things, Jonathan, the other possibilities will open up.
Does that help you, Jonathan? We're running late again. I haven't gotten the show done, in an hour my whole time. Does that help you at all, Jonathan?
That does. Actually, that's an excellent suggestion, and thank you.
All right. Well, you know what? We're going to let you go, Jonathan, because I got to get Jordan back to work here. I've already passed our limit. But thanks for joining us, and good luck. And you know what? Keep us posted. I actually checked back on some of the folks I talked to see how we're doing. And I'll be interested to see how you do it. And hopefully we'll hear some music and see some of these ideas in action.
We'll look for a great song and a great video somewhere down the line.
All right. Perfect. Thank you,
You
Jonathan.
got it, guys.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Today, we're 5 minutes past, Joe? Okay. It's a rainy day here, and I told Jordan when we finished our Linkin Park tour that we would knock one back here. And so we sent Jordan over a bottle of Glenlivet. Must have been a tough week because, can you come in close on that? That thing is not full. There's been some nipping on the sauce before we get here. So it's Friday. I have my Pinehurst number 2
Beautiful
glasses here. I'm not a big whiskey drinker, but so I'll just take a little pop here. And Jordan has a very short drive, so I don't think this will get to the 0.8 level before we get there. But
so I think you talked about being able to celebrate your successes, and I guess this is a great moment to congratulate you and thank you for the wonderful tour that we together put together and marketed over the summer.
If this works out, maybe we go out and do a college tour of our own, the Jordan and Ren show. So cheers. Knock one back.
There you go.
Love that stuff, folks. Want to thank you for joining us next Monday and Wednesday. That's good stuff, man.
That's very nice.
We have my
I'm gonna
good friend,
savor
Mr.
it.
Tom Corson from RCA. Do we have a little bit from Tom here? There he is, Tom Corson, President, Chief Operating Officer of RCA Music Group, another friend of mine I've known for years. So happy to have him on here. We had a great conversation. I know you'll learn a lot. I want to thank you for joining us. I hope you keep coming back. I hope you keep asking questions and you keep learning. Jordan, thanks for joining. Would you come back again?
I'd love
This
to.
was, we were just getting rolling.
This
here.
is great.
I got a whole freaking shopping list of stuff that I need to
I
get to.
would love to be your Ed McMahon.
Perfect. I think, what we should do one day is we should have a roundtable, bands and managers together. Might be a little dangerous, but it'd be fun to have Shinoda or Chester or Mike and Brandon here, and we could have a little
Just check
chat.
the weapons at the door.
Check the weapons at the door. All right, that's it for us today. This is Renman Live, RenmanMusicandBusiness.com. I'm Steve Rennie. That's Jordan Berliant. My friends call me Ren, and I'm going to call you JB. We are out of here, folks. Have fun over the weekend.